is part of the tit-for-tat story that has been going on between China and the US for the past few years, and probably will continue when the new administration comes in. In this particular instance, China has put a ban on these metals such as gallium and germanium. They can be used in things like semiconductors, night goggles used by the military, etc. Now, sales and shipments of these products from China to the US had already plunged anyway in anticipation of this. Some of those involved in the supply chain have reasonably good inventories in place, but nonetheless, it is an example of how China can be serious and how China can retaliate when it comes to trade tensions. And this, of course, it was in response to previous White House measures to curb technology going to China.
I have to admit, I didn't really know of any of these metals, with the notable exception of graphite. This hits home because I play graphite shafts in my golf club. So if they're going to be putting,
there you go.
And this is hitting close to home here. So, and just globally, as you talk to your sources around the world, how are they viewing tariff threats by President Trump? Is this something that could affect global trade, or, as some people suggest, it's just a negotiating ploy to kind of get people to the table, and maybe some other issues that are more near and dear to his heart?
I think face value, rival trading partners and economies around the world are taking this very seriously, because if there's anywhere President Trump has been consistent, it's on trade and tariffs. So they know something's coming down the pipe. The scale of it, of course, is what the big question is, and nobody knows what exact levels. But what is new, though, is we'll say this time around companies are more prepared for tariffs on China. For example, they've been shuffling supply lines, they've been through this before, and of course the pandemic created enormous upheaval. So there's an element of preparedness this time around. But what is new is this idea that President Trump will put tariffs on all the other trading nations as well. So even if you move your production out of China and you set up shop in, say, Vietnam or Morocco or Mexico to try and get around that, well, suddenly you could come under tariffs from there as well. So I think there's certainly a degree of caution among business people, among officials and foreign capitals. Everyone's waiting to see how this goes, but I think people are taking it pretty seriously.
So, and also I should point out that this tit for tat is because of President Biden's new rules, not even President Trump. So we don't even know what that tit for tat would look like. Can the U.S. substitute Paul's graphite?
Well, I'll have to plead the fifth on that particular one, but from what I'm aware of, when this minerals issue has been kind of coming going for several years now, there are inventories in place. Those in the supply chain do have the stocks that they need for now. And there's also been discussion of sourcing these kind of minerals and metals from elsewhere in the world, including the US, by the way. I know it's been part of the permitting debate here that President Trump has highlighted when it comes to deregulation. So yes, this is an example of how China can strike back. It is a complication, but I know there's also a conversation going on that the US companies can also look to alternative sources too.
And what is the sense of China's view towards, from a trade perspective, towards the US here? Is this one that they want to work with the US, or is it getting colder and colder as we move forward?
Well, I suppose on the one hand, they've sent some kind of soft messaging early on while they wait for President Trump to take office in January. They've been making the point that both economies can work together. They've been sending some soft signals that perhaps there could be areas to cooperate on trade, but they have their red lines. The red lines on issues, say, for example, in what they describe as internal interference or interference over Taiwan, for example. So there's kind of they're hanging this olive branch out there that they could talk business when it comes down to it. But nonetheless, again, President Trump has been consistently hawkish on China and on doing business with China. And if he does go through with at least some of the threats that he's talked about in terms of tariffs on Chinese goods, then that will certainly force China to calibrate, and they will look for ways to strike back against the US where they can. Whether it is making it more awkward for US businesses to operate in China, or imposing other restrictions where they can. If President Trump does pull the trigger on a trade war, China will respond.